Hey everybody, welcome to Game Mess Mornings with me, Jeff Grubb, your host from giantbomb.com. Thank you for tuning in. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the future of Xbox as the industry continues to shift and change, and more from that Bluepoint situation. It's going to be a good one because we have Lex Luddy on the show. Lexi, how are you doing?
Oh, pretty terribly, Grubb, but let's not talk about that. How you doing?
Yeah, same. I'm doing all right. It's fun. It's like, I really enjoy the Olympics. I enjoy it more when I can sort of just, I grew up like rooting for Team USA at these things. It's a lot easier when you could like comfortably just sit back and be like, I hope they do all right and not have to worry about them partying with fucking Kash Patel in the locker room after they win and just being like, what was it all for if this is what you were going to do? So yeah, it's a good time here. Even the escapism just crashes right into that goddamn wall all over again. But yeah, who am I to complain? I'm doing all right.
Yeah, we're hanging in there. Good video games exist still, that's pretty notable at the moment. Like, despite everything else going on, being able to play good video games is still like, Karen's pretty good, huh?
Yeah,
Romeo's a Dead Man, pretty fun.
There's been a lot of like, oh, that's really solid games so far this year, which I appreciate. It's like, okay, like even as like no one was expecting a lot from the early part of this year until we get to like Resident Evil here in a couple of days. In the meantime, it's like, oh no, there's been several, like Paranormasight is one I keep wanting to check out. I know it's not for me, but it just looks interesting enough that I want to give it a shot. And people are like, no, yeah, it's really, really good. So, and then every day someone like messages me about a new indie game, and there's going to be the Next Fest happening starting right now, right? It's starting today. If not, it's this week. And it's like, okay, yeah. And there's always 4 or 5 games that come out of there that are not just like worth checking out. Many of them end up being like game of the year contenders and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll play some video games. It's going to be a good week on the website, everybody, for that. So just stick around. We'll have plenty to go on, especially as like Resident Evil does come out. I'm sure we'll be talking about that. Let's explain ourselves though. We're Giant Bomb. We're independent games media out here on our own, just making dumb stuff on the internet. But if you want us to keep doing that, as we want to keep doing that, go to giantbomb.com/join, become a premium member. It ensures the future of this independent games media operation. We can keep making that kind of stuff, and it gets you special goodies like ad-free shows, Grubb Snacks Premium, Marry Me Tomodachi, which I showed to the kids because they like Tomodachi Life, and they were very, very impressed by Abby's me-making skills. My wife like commented on it. She's like, that's just Jeff Bakalar. That is just Jeff Bakalar's soul captured into a video game. Did you get a chance to check any of that out?
It's messed up how good she is at it. Like,
it's messed up.
It made sense when it was The Sims and there's so many sliders and, configurable things that you can do. You can really tailor it to hone in on specific traits.
She doesn't need that. Yeah.
Yeah. The Mii's like, it's such a limited canvas, and still I'm like, man, Dan does have crazy eyes.
He does indeed. But yeah, you go to giantbomb.com/join, become a premium member, and you get all that good stuff. Please and thank you. As far as this show goes, most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings, or find the RSS feed on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with that story we missed on Friday.
It was a slow news weekend.
You're right.
Nothing happened.
Nothing happened since that last Game Mess Mornings.
I actually did mean to bring this up. It's kind of fucked up that you keep on getting me on for drag stays like this. Like,
yes, right, yeah.
It's an hour of my time, and then there's nothing to talk about.
I need someone to come out there and dance for these people and entertain them. Yeah. Do something, because we have nothing else going on. For example, nothing like Phil Spencer leaves Xbox, new Microsoft gaming CEO steps in. Let's kind of cover the basics here. Phil Spencer retiring after 38 years at Microsoft. He stated he had been planning to step down since fall of 2025 and will remain as special advisor through summer 2026 to assist with the transition. Sarah Bond, who was publicly considered his heir apparent, she is also resigning. That is more unexpected, as many viewed her as Spencer's heir apparent. Bond noted it was the, quote, right time to take her next professional step, and will also serve as a temporary advisor to Sharma, who is Asha Sharma, formerly the president of Microsoft's Core AI product division. Sharma has been named the new executive vice president and CEO of Microsoft Gaming. She has a background in scaling platforms at Meta and Instacart rather than traditional game development. That will become a point of contention. We'll talk about that, as I'm sure we talk about all sides of this. Meanwhile, Matt Booty continues to go up. Matt Booty, previously the head of Xbox Game Studio. Booty has been promoted to executive.
Keep on doing what you're doing, Matt. Keep on doing what you're doing.
Can't stop the booty. Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer. He will report directly to Sharma and oversee all internal development teams across Xbox, Bethesda, and Activision Blizzard. Look, there's a lot more to get into. Tom Warren had a report this morning. We'll get into that. I tried to grab it real quick. It was behind a paywall. I paid it, so I have the story here, but I think I might just hit the highlights regardless. Before we do that, though, hey, what the hell?
Yeah, the 5 p.m. on Friday. 5 p.m. on a Friday when all good news stories get released.
It's the golden hours, they call it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it comes up in Tom Warren's reporting, but the scale and magnitude of how unorganized this is maybe one of the more notable things about it.
Well, it just looks that way because the agentic AI is handling most of it, and it's very organized. You know,
I'm not sure if you saw my Blue Sky post about it, but did you read Satya Nadella's statement?
No, I don't know if I did. I might have seen it.
Let me pull up the first line of it because it is maybe the most obviously I didn't like this thing imaginable. This is the opening sentence of Satya Nadella's statement that went up alongside this.
Games have changed a lot since Pac-Man. All right, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, no, don't tell me. All right, read it. I gotta hear it.
Gaming has been a part of Microsoft from the start. Flight Simulator shipped before Windows, and you can practically ray trace the line from DirectX to the 90s to the accelerated compute era we're in today. Most notable thing about this is that 90s is done, 90, S. Like a totally human person would write that.
Yeah, boy. Hey, that's some great work there, Copilot. Very meaningful to me what you wrote. Okay. I mean, that's the subtext to this entire story, right? Is that it seems like Microsoft, the AI company, is saying we need even more AI in our games, to the point where we need someone who is all in and gung-ho and basically operates her entire life on that. We need her in charge. Let's hit some of this Tom Warren stuff just so we can get, because I think he did a good job of getting some of the answers we've been looking for here. So let me just hit this on Phil Spencer, longtime head of Xbox. Internally, employees say Bond's departure had felt increasingly likely in recent months. They also said that Asha Sharma's ascendancy seemed inevitable. The Activision Blizzard acquisition dragged on far longer than expected, which strained leadership. Basically, it put Microsoft in the crosshairs of governments around the world for a very long time. And I bet that was pretty frustrating. This, you know what? Let's go back to that real quick. At the time, I think I said this on a lot of Game Mess mornings and wherever else I might have been talking about this. It never seemed like it was. Is it LisaCon? It's LisaCon, right?
Yeah.
LisaCon. It never seemed like LisaCon stood a strong chance of winning that case. But I was always like, it's still worth it for her to air it out, because any sort of friction, any sort of frustration she puts in front of these companies will be something that they remember and factor into their costs going forward. And this feels like, in the end, she definitely hurt this company much more than they're willing to admit in terms of how they felt about that whole thing. And so, like,
Lena Khan, sorry.
Lena, thank you, Lena. I knew it just didn't sound right. Thank you, Lena Khan. And so, like, the fact that she kind of was willing to go in there and throw herself in there head first into fighting that without a strong case of or hoping to win under the way the rules currently operate, I think it still shows that she's right, that politically you should be doing anything you can to stand in the way to force these companies to really consider every choice that they're making. But that's an aside. Microsoft's shift away from Xbox exclusives towards a multi-platform strategy created internal tension. I think this is something that's like a public secret, right? We've known this, that there was constantly conversations back and forth, and like who fell on what side was maybe a little unclear, but it certainly seemed like...
I mean, right from the off, like Bethesda were like, yeah, actually not us though, you know,
right,
for a while there. And, you know, they were like, even, you know, as companies were being acquired, some of them were staying multi-platform and some of them weren't, and then that quickly shifted to now everything's multi-platform, and yeah.
Yeah.
It always felt weird.
I bet that was another thing, like you pile that on top of what was happening with Activision, those conversations probably got pretty heated. Efforts to redefine Xbox beyond the console produced mixed results. Like they were, everything is an Xbox. You sort of say that, and I think the biggest sort of thing you can point to from that campaign is the meme. It kind of became a meme. Everything is an Xbox. That's, hey, look, it's hard to for a corporation to manufacture even a meme, but I bet they were looking for more of a return on investment than that. Spencer's resignation triggered months of succession planning. They also, Tom Warren reports, it sounds like this was a mess. The leadership change was supposed to be announced later, but leaks forced Microsoft to reveal it early. Some Xbox teams learned the news from reports and news outlets before receiving internal communication. The article is part of he's been covering this for a while. And I kind of wrote down here that Bond had an internal memo about leaving, and this does not signify layoffs, is the last thing I wrote down here. Okay. Let's kind of reassess now that we got a little bit of that out of the way. How do you view what is happening here?
I think the Phil Spencer stuff has kind of been expected for a while. I think that, it's become pretty clear that he's like, well, a lot of people blame me for a lot of stuff. And, the more I keep doing this, the more I'm just the head of the kind of final years of this thing. And people don't associate me with any of the successes that I had anymore. And so I can totally see him wanting to step away. As for the Sarah Barnes stuff, she was his pick. As far as I know, she was the person that he wanted to replace her. I think that something that comes up in here is, even her teams not being aware that this was happening that day and putting up that LinkedIn post asking for feedback on player accessibility and stuff kind of points to how out of the loop she was kept on this towards the end. And I think there's a lot more layers to it than simply she spearheaded one failed initiative.
Yeah.
There's a lot of executives that spearhead a lot of fucking dumb shit and keep their jobs. And this is probably an accumulation of stuff. And, there's everything that you could take into account from there's stuff that we don't know about to, maybe Xbox or Microsoft being do we want a black woman running one of our divisions? All of these different socio-political things and just basic things add up to how Sahir makes this call. I also think it's pretty believable that Sahir probably asked Copilot at one point who he should replace her with. That's pure speculation.
I mean, I think it's a safe assumption at this point, the way he talks about how he uses that stuff. But you're right. We're just speculating on that. I think there's a lot of the argument among the fanboy sort of atmosphere out there is, hey, wouldn't Sarah Bond have been better? Didn't we want Sarah Bond? And it's no, I don't really think she makes much of a difference in the future of Xbox versus this new person. I
think she was maybe more up to speed,
Yeah, maybe.
That probably would have helped.
Right, but like, the conversation around the idea that Asha Sharma does not play video games. I don't think Sarah Bond played video games all that much. Like like that. Like if that's the concern, you're not getting that much of a different person. But I think you're right. Sarah Bond up to speed, and she at least was in the spirit of, for all of Xbox's failings, even under and especially under Phil Spencer, he at least made it feel like they were in the game by paying attention, being engaged, and sort of talking to the audience. And so it made it worthwhile to sort of pay attention to this company because it felt like there was someone that was listening. So if we had these conversations, they would get back to him and he would maybe act on them, maybe not, and maybe make the right decision, probably not, whatever. But it just felt like, okay, he was engaged, and that's something. Sarah Bond was trained under that and likely would have been aware of that. I think Microsoft was mostly done doing that in a very open and bold way because it's burned them so many times now. But at the very least, she would have known how to do that. I don't think, based on Asha Sharma's weekend, where she is clearly having AI respond to these people about their concerns about the Xbox platform and its future.
She's definitely writing all of those responses herself on Twitter. Take off for landing, she says to Microsoft Flight Simulator people or whatever, and let's go, she says to Nintendo. Fucking yeah.
It's right. So that's what she's been doing this weekend. I don't think that Sarah Bond would have been like that necessarily. But I don't think things were going to be looking much more brighter under any sort of leader after Phil. So Asha Sharma is on Twitter, and she's responding to people with hear you when they ask questions like, hey, we want exclusives to come back to the Xbox platform.
He has stopped now since she was called out on this, by the way. There was a very clear cutoff of, hey, she stopped replying.
Yep, I bet she has. What does hear you mean when it comes to exclusives on the Xbox coming back? No, they're not. We know they're not coming back. That's not even on the table. Why would she say that?
Because she didn't say that is probably the answer. Because, AIs are trained to yes and hear you is a very customer support response.
Okay, let's just ask that question then. So how important is it for someone in her position to actually play games? This has become one of the debates that's happened in the wake of this.
So Reggie Fils-Aimé famously worked for Guinness and he worked for Reebok, I think, before Nintendo. And, he was a character. He was a charismatic guy. And he kind of got over the hump of clearly not being a gamer by being very charismatic. And I think that you could see that he at least really put his whole self into what he was selling. It's also worth noting that, he was the head of Nintendo of America. He wasn't the head of Nintendo.
This is 25 years ago as well, right? So he comes from a different generation where it was very easy to grow up not playing games, especially for someone trying to be a black man in America trying to make his way in business, right? He was had different priorities.
And I think that in this case, you look at it and you go more. When you're talking about the head of a massive division, you usually want someone who understands the division and didn't start their Xbox account a month ago. And is clearly having someone else unlock random achievements to make it look like they played. I think that if they're aware enough that it looks bad that she's not a gamer, that kind of tells you how much of not a gamer she is. Of them being like, oh, we have to unlock some Minecraft trophies or achievements. I was like, oh boy. But, I think that it is really important for the people in charge of these decisions to understand how these games actually get made. Because especially when you put it in the perspective of you have the person in charge of core AI coming in who maybe understands a negative amount of how these get, inverse understanding to other people, which is I just pressed
told
the
what
button
AI can do. Right, yeah.
Yeah, I just pressed the button and the thing is in front of me, right?
I saw the headline.
Yeah, I saw that Gemini stuff. Why aren't we just doing that? And so, I don't think that this is a great setup for good beginnings. And, we might eat crow here. We might totally eat crow.
Of course.
I don't think we will. I would bet most of my life savings that we wouldn't.
Well, get on the poly market. Make it happen then, Lexi. Put your money where your mouth is.
You're right.
Look, you're right. I think it's weird because in any other medium, I think we would not be having this conversation. It would be unacceptable for a book publisher CEO to say, I don't read books. It would be unacceptable for a film company, while we know it actually might be true in the case of like a Zaslav, right? For a Zaslav to come out and say, I don't watch movies, or for him to clearly have not ever watched a movie and then be in that role, it would just be impossible. We're not there yet with gaming, and I think you can point to successful people in this space who like outright shout they don't play games. Strauss Zelnick at least has made a lot of money. And so like the people like, okay, he's running the company. He says, I don't play games. I'm not the consumer in chief is his line whenever he's confronted about
money
this.
Every day, hand over fist. They've never lost money on AI, right?
Right, exactly right. And it's like you're coming from this space that is of questionable provenance and success, and that is your sort of business card that you're dropping, and you don't have the bona fides from the space that you're going into. In 20 years, this will not be acceptable. Like, this will clearly not be acceptable. I think you're right. She could still find success and we could be eating crow. But why, at this point, for a business that includes, you're trying to shift its business model away from the console, but it's clearly still a gaming business, and you're going to be making Minecraft and Call of Duty and all this other stuff into the future. There's two sides of it. Like, there is the Boeing thing. Boeing is the example that involves people's lives, so I'm not going to take it easy, lightly or whatever. But there is this concept where Boeing had an engineer in charge of them for a very long time, and they became this very successful company. And then it sort of reached its plateau, and then they put a money person in charge, and that money person did find a way to increase the value of everything. And then the planes weren't very good anymore. And it's like, I think right now Microsoft's planes aren't very good. So what kind of person are you putting in charge again? And this does not match up with the need of this company from my point of view.
And, I think something that came up a lot on social media is like, well, let's give them a fair shake. They haven't done anything yet. They've made one public statement, and, they haven't made any decisions. We don't know their direction. And my question for those people is like, what case has giving the benefit of the doubt to a CEO wound up being positive? Like, at what time? How many times have we been like, well, they really proved us wrong. They really were men of the people, and they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, and they were right. And so it's really, and like people being out there being like, she's saying the right things, and I'm like, yeah, they all do. They are trained
not
to,
even table stakes. Yep.
Like, if they weren't saying the right things, they wouldn't have the job. They wouldn't be in the place where they are now. So yeah, I don't know. This whole thing, it doesn't feel good, does it? None of it feels good.
And I think, for all the conversation about whether or not she's played games, I think, they are screaming at us what is really happening here. She is a Satya Nadella yes man coming from AI. And that is, they don't have to dangle the keys in front of us of her not being a gamer or whatever. Like, we know what's really happening here. Like I said from the beginning, the subtext of every single part of this story is Microsoft, the AI company, is putting someone from AI in charge of Xbox, something that, like, they gestured at under Phil in a strong way. They gestured toward AI. But now it's like, oh, the gloves will come off on this, and they think that is the future. And will they be transforming everything in the shape of that? What does that look like? It probably looks like dog shit. And now we have to sit here and watch it happen in slow motion, or I guess slightly faster motion than it was already happening. All right. And then I guess the last thing here is, if you're someone at Xbox right now, my understanding is there's a lot of people looking around at each other being like, let's just go for broke. Like, let's see what we can get away with under this new leadership, sort of ask for forgiveness instead of permission. And I think that's your best hope for maybe getting a few more good games out of this company before it is cooked to the point that Microsoft abandons it.
Yeah, I mean, your options realistically are ask for forgiveness rather than permission, or ask for independence similarly to Toys for Bob.
Yeah.
And that's kind of your two routes, because either which way, you're probably not going to exist underneath the Microsoft umbrella within 5 or 10 years, generously. Because they don't want developers. They don't want a lot of employees. Microsoft is very blatantly out there saying, like, we want less employees. We want all of this stuff being done by, like, agentic fucking assistants and whatever we can also automate. So clearly they, like, yes, they don't want you there, so get away with what you can get away with while you can, or get the fuck out while the getting's good, and, you know, build something healthier and more sustainable outside of that ecosystem.
Yep. I feel bad for anyone who's stuck in this, and hopefully you can navigate it as best you can and find a soft exit if that's what you need to do. All right, so we covered most of the aspects of this. Let's take a break. We'll come back and start talking about Bluepoint, because there's a little bit more from there, maybe some reporting, some people got talked to. We'll see what we have to say about that after these messages. If you want to skip out on these ads, go to giantbomb.com/join, become a premium member. Once you do that, on the website, you can find the ad-free versions of the video and audio show. Grab those. In the meantime, we will be right back. All right, it's Game Mess Mornings. Jeff Grubb, Lex Luddy. Lexi, let's get back into it. Before closing, Bluepoint Games pitched 2 remakes to Sony. I think you can figure out what happened with that. From Instant Gaming News, one of the biggest news stories of the week was undoubtedly the closure of Bluepoint Games. The studio behind the remakes of Demon's Souls and Shadow of the Colossus will close its doors in March. On Twitter, insider Detective Seed said he managed to contact 2 former employees of the company to understand what happened. So here we're taking him on his word that he actually talked to real people, and those employees knew what they were talking about. But this is out there, and Jason Schreier has debunked some stuff, not this. This doesn't fly in the face of anything I've heard, but let's just kind of put that little grain of salt on top of all this. The 2 developers worked in 2 separate divisions. They obviously wished to remain anonymous, which they did in the story. First, the subject of the God of War live service game was raised. The project began during the production of Ragnarok, in which Bluepoint participated. Sony quickly approved this connected title proposed by the studio, but it missed several deadlines. Bluepoint realized that the game was far too ambitious for a team of 70 or so people. Ultimately, the Japanese manufacturer canceled the game in early 2025. I think we can probably suss out the suggestion here being that Bluepoint Games wanted to work on this. It sounds like the kind of thing where it's like they liked working in the God of War space, and the live service stuff was what they were able to do. Or I guess this is my reading on the situation. The live service stuff provided them the framework to get the approval for a massive budget to make this game. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah. You know, like, even when you say this is the game we want to make, you have to remember that this is the game we think will be allowed to make. And this is the game that we think will get approved by the people with purse strings. So yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
After that, Bluepoint Games did not work on any approved projects until it closed. The company proposed 4 game ideas, but all were rejected by PlayStation. Among these titles were 2 remakes of single-player games, one of which is currently in development at a different studio. Maybe we can assume that was the God of War 1, 2, and 3 remake. Yeah. I mean, they obviously they know God of War. I bet they might have suggested that would have been good for them. In any case, the atmosphere has deteriorated significantly after the cancellation of the God of War live service game, and employees had already decided to leave. As a result, only about 50 to 60 people remain when the closure was announced. Since no projects had been approved by PlayStation, the studio's demise was expected by a large part of the team, which is definitely what I heard, that it wasn't surprising, even if it was very infuriating. Like the writing was on the wall, the writing was really stupid on the wall. Okay, so just a little bit more there. Kind of lines up with a lot of stuff I think we could have pieced together in terms of they were pitching stuff. They were probably pitching remakes. Yeah, they were, at least according to this reporting, this story. After having some time to digest it, how are you feeling about Sony and Bluepoint and all of this?
Infuriated was the right word. Like, everything about this seems like you really couldn't figure out something to do with one of the most, like, technically talented and, like, the most institutional knowledge of any of the studios that you have. You couldn't find anything for them to do on any other projects that you're working on, and your only solution was to get them entirely off your books, was to basically be like, no, you actually can't make any of these projects. Like, we are so adverse to risk that we're not even going to let you work on a new IP that could hit, or we're not going to let you work on a remake of something that will probably make a relatively fair amount of money. Or like, it, especially if one of those remakes was God of War, if that God of War actual remake is now being handled internally by Sony Santa Monica, that's a massive project. That's not a small project. That is 3 games, and it is going to require, 1, a lot of outsourcing, and 2, a lot of like Sony Santa Monica's time and attention. And you already have a situation where things like the Heretic Prophet and Cory Barlog's new game are taking like 5-8 years to make. And you're putting more strain on those handful of studios that get blank checks. Like, these things don't operate at scale. We see that with Ubisoft. You can't just throw more employees at one studio or one company and make it so that they can make the exact same equivalent amount of more products. Because these people have to work as a team, they have to integrate, they have to find workflows, they have to do this and that. You want separate, distinct teams with separate, distinct voices working on separate, distinct projects, because if one of them goes wrong, it doesn't affect the other. And the idea of, like, actually, let's take some of these eggs out of this basket, because you're so hoping that the one egg that you have in the basket is going to wind up being like a golden goose, is like insane. It's insane to me. Like, I understand why it happens, but it's fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's this is one of like, of all these this parade of negative stories we've had for the last couple of years, but especially in the last few months, and maybe even so, especially in the last couple of weeks. This is the one that's like, oh, it really does feel fully cooked, because what this story says to us at this point is these traditional places where it's not just like, oh man, gaming is like only a certain kind of game can be made in the United States. Like, a place like Austin, Texas is one of the bedrocks of where video games were like turned into a full-fledged medium. And they can't make games there anymore. Not in any, like, not unless you are id. And I mean, we'll see. Like, how does Microsoft feel about id after, it seems like Doom didn't quite live up to expectations? We'll see. It's very frustrating, like, to know that, like, it felt like, okay, but Bluepoint has carved out a niche. Like, it can work, right? And it's like, no. We've built up an infrastructure around the world.
Return on investment on that niche isn't as big as a potential return on investment on something that is less likely to hit.
And you know what, like, happens here is the people who were at Bluepoint, many of them could leave, start their own like outsourcing project studio, and Sony immediately hires them back to help with that God of War remake, but at a fraction of the cost of what they would have had to pay them if they were employed there. This is, I think, we can, like, unions would probably not have saved these people, but an industry-wide union certainly would have helped somewhat. We have a lot of studio-specific unions. I think when people were calling for unions in this industry a long time ago, what we meant was an industry-wide union similar to how it operates in Hollywood. That's what these people really need. And short of that, this stuff is not just going to keep happening. It's going to be the default for this industry. And here we are again. How are we feeling about Sony overall? Like, like they have defaulted into this space where they are the place. That's where people are going to play GTA 6. So it's like, it sort of has this bubble of invulnerability around it right now, where it's like any sort of bad feelings don't matter until GTA 6 happens, and then that's going to kind of take off like its own rocket. But Sony doesn't need to operate that way, right? They don't need to like run their business in a way where it's like, oh yeah, we don't have to make the right decision, or we don't have to invest in our future because we have this big sort of the elephant in the room happening here later this year. How are you feeling about Sony overall?
Yeah, like, I'm not a CEO, pretty evidently, but in a lot of ways, I've never been able to figure out the mentality of, like, let's just hitch our wagon to another company being successful. Like, if they do great, then we'll do better than them somehow at some point. When they do put things in such hyper-competitive, like when they view the world in such a hyper-competitive way, the fact that they are relying on another company's product to be their boon for this year, to be their real, like, big seller and the thing that makes them a lot of money, that doesn't seem healthy. That doesn't seem like a thing that they should be relying on. And yeah, like, I don't know, that state of play was good, and then everything since then I've been like, man, this doesn't feel good either. Why is it that every time I interact with this hobby, I come away thinking this doesn't feel good? Oh no.
Yep. People are at other Sony studios are kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But that's just people being like seeing this and being like, okay, if we have not gotten like three of our last pitches confirmed, are we next or something like that? You got to imagine like Ben Studios looking around. If they're not working on something, like, are we next? And I bet they're not the only studio feeling that way. These big corporations that have made their business consoles for a very long time, it feels like they are at some sort of natural end and they are flailing around in a way that is hurting everybody else. Kind of hope they could just figure it out and we can get back to some sort of stable status quo. Even if it's worse now, because it's like, I think we've accepted that gaming's in a weird lull right now. So maybe it's just going to be worse, but just, you don't have to like add on top of that with your flailing at these companies. All right, let's continue on. Nintendo Treehouse returns this week with a pair of gameplay showcases. This is from Jim Norman at Nintendo Life. Another week, another Nintendo surprise. Perhaps this one isn't quite as big as those in recent memory, but Nintendo has announced that it's bringing back its Treehouse showcase this week with gameplay presentations for the catchily titled Super Mario Bros. Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Meetup in Bella Bell Park, which is cool. And Pokemon Pokopia.
Sorry, I think you mean the Super Mario Wonder Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Meetup in Bella Bell Park game.
Yes, exactly. TM and rights reserved. This is happening on, is it tomorrow? Yes, I think it's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern. Okay. Yeah, I think this is not the Nintendo Direct that people were hoping for, but people keep saying Nintendo needs to start talking about some of the other games they have. They're still focused on reminding people Pokopia is coming, and they have a lot more Nintendo Switch 2 editions. I think people are running out of patience with the Nintendo Switch 2 edition stuff, though. Lexi, what do you think?
Yeah, did you see any of the stuff around that Xenoblade Nintendo Switch 2 edition?
Yeah, did I think I meant to include it, but I don't think I actually did. No, yeah, I got it. It's 2 stories down. Nintendo, let's just hit it now. Nintendo. Yeah. No, it's okay. Nintendo seemingly offering refunds for poor Xenoblade Chronicles X Switch 2 upgrade. This is from My Nintendo News. Nintendo has apparently started refunding those who have asked for their money back for the disappointing Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition Nintendo Switch 2 upgrade. There have been numerous videos on the subject on YouTube, with many reporting that the game looks worse than it did without the upgrade, with poor texture issues and upscaling techniques. It's not clear who did the upgrade, according to this story. But yeah, people have been like, $5 for this, and this is bad. Give me my money back. And Nintendo is starting to do that. This is starting to feel like another straw on the camel's back in regard to how people are feeling about their Nintendo Switch 2. If this is happening in concert with a bunch of first-party games, like, that would feel a little bit different, because it feels like a dearth on that side of things. Or we get maybe the disappointing tennis game to a lot of people. People are sort of like, hey, why did I spend so much money on this system?
And like, without being mean or weird about it, like, they didn't have to go about upgrading it this way. They had that cap in the settings to just raise the frame rate cap. People did that manually on overclocked switches.
Yep.
And also, like, an emulator right now for Wii U can run that game at 4K with 4K assets. Like, you don't need to upscale those textures with AI, which is how I'm presuming you get lower quality texture detail when you're upscaling textures like that. Like, you don't need to. You can just bump up the internal resolution and it will probably look much more pleasing to the eye. I've been thinking about this a lot, Grubb. How fucking weird is the mood going to be at the Game Awards this year?
Yeah, it's gonna be. I mean, it's gonna be weird at Summer Game Fest. It's actually gonna be. It could be rancid at Summer Game Fest, right? We'll be
Yeah,
going. We'll be
because
coming out of this
also
stuff,
no one will be at Summer
and no
Games
one's gonna
Fest
be
who
there.
isn't American.
Yes, it's gonna be like it's gonna stink. And then we're gonna carry that energy into the Game Awards. Yeah, it's gonna feel kind of bad across the board.
I tell you what, though, the pubs at Gamescom are gonna be fucking wild.
Yes, maybe we'll try to get out there for that again this year. That would be good. But yeah, look, Nintendo's in a weird spot with this stuff where I think this stuff would be easy for them to gloss over if they had their 3D Mario game ready to go, if they had Zelda, if Pokemon Gen 10 was a little bit closer. But in the meantime, people are looking around and asking themselves, why did I spend so much money on this system? That leads into the January 2026 U.S. video game market highlights report from Circana. Matt Piscatella shared this on Blue Sky as he normally does. He does point out the industry saw an increase of 3% sort of across the board. And this is for United States.
Gaming is saved. Spending. Never been a better time to be a gamer.
We're back. It's kind of keeping up with inflation a little bit. That is a 3% increase for video game content as well, which is like just everything that is a video game or video game DLC or microtransactions. Video game hardware, though, was up 16%, while accessories were down 5%. We'll talk about that accessory spending to cap this off. So yeah, let's see. The top selling game was Call of Duty Black Ops 7 still, which maybe like that game was a disappointment. So maybe that is like a real bad sign. That's where we're at. But again, it's up year over year. The only new game on the chart was, I think, Code Vein 2 at number 11. So it's a lot of games that had already released. And then like the Switch 2 and Xbox versions of Final Fantasy 7 Remake had that jump from 225 to number 9 on the chart. So it did all right.
To be fair, Code Vein 2 being the only new release game there, like we talk a lot about like, hey, January had some good releases. January had like Cairn. That's not going to be on the Circana reports. No. That's for you and me. That's not for people who are buying physical games.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And this does include digital, but not from like smaller publishers like Cairn.
Yeah.
So that just would not show up on here no matter what. But as far as hardware went, hardware spending increased that aforementioned 16% when compared to a year ago, reaching $248 million. Switch 2 spending was able to offset year-on-year declines across PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and Switch. Those were down 17%, 27%, and 79% respectively. But despite sales falling compared to a year ago, PlayStation 5 led the hardware market in both unit and dollar sales for January. Nintendo Switch 2 ranked second across both measures. Now, there's a couple things there. I think people are like, PlayStation 5 still outselling the Switch 2. That's probably bad for the Switch 2. And I think probably. But there is a bell curve to hardware sales. And PlayStation 5 is still in the middle-ish part of that. Yeah, it's declining, but it's still in the middle-ish part where it's higher than it is at launch. Now, usually I would chalk that up to supply constraints earlier in the generation, but it's obviously not always just supply constraints. So Switch 2 should like sell more next January than it did this January, and that'll be closer to the middle of the bell curve for its console sales. But regardless, I mean, how do you read this? Is Switch 2 like slipping? Obviously, that price is hurting it, right?
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I did see sales for PlayStation stuff in ways that I haven't seen sales for any Switch 2 things carry over past December. Even if that is just like, hey, get an extra controller with your PS5 or whatever, there are minor ways that they are getting bumps. And when you consider basically neither of them had like big first party releases, I can see how this does happen. It's not a great sign, but I also do think like Nintendo, out of all of the companies around, have the most cards to play. They have the most cards in their hand. They're gonna be like the episode of The Simpsons where they're playing poker and they're like, "Joke's on you, 5 aces." And so, they do definitely have things that they just haven't talked about. And I think that the impatience is coming from, hey, why haven't you talked about these things? And not, hey, you clearly don't have these things, which is where the frustration with someone like Sony is coming from, is, hey, you clearly don't have things ready right now. And you are relying on your third parties in a way that isn't healthy. Whereas Nintendo can be like, no, we have stuff, we're just not showing it yet.
Yeah, and I think someone asked this recently on one of the episodes, like, will we get past this point and sort of look back at it as like, oh yeah, that happened at the beginning of the generation when they didn't have a lot of games, but no one really thinks about that anymore because we did get Mario and Zelda and Smash Brothers and Pokemon and all this stuff, and then people were happy. We will get to that point very likely, as long as the games are new and interesting. I think if it like we end up getting a lot of stuff that feels like Mario Tennis Fever, which I think is an all right game, a game I liked, but it's very familiar. That begins to add up and stack against Nintendo, where it's like this is very samey, and you are trying to justify this console to people who already have a Switch. You are not making a strong argument to those people.
To put it in perspective, my godson is about 7 now, and his uncle is a bit older than me. He's the youngest of the children on my mom's side. And he was like, oh, I'm going to get him a Switch for Christmas. I was like, oh, you should probably get him a Switch too, because like it's, all things considered, not a whole lot more expensive, and like it will keep him happy for a lot longer. Because as he kind of figures out, you know, what things are and what these things actually are, and as he gets more online, you know, in that kind of 10, 11, 12 age, and starts to figure out, you know, what new video games are and stuff like that himself, he will kind of be like, oh, I want the newer one. And his dad was like, yeah, but like there's enough on the Switch 1 that I can just get him the Switch 1 and he will be happy for so long and so quiet about it. Like, he won't care. And because he's probably not as tuned into, you know, things like I was when I was 11, 12, that age, when it comes to stuff like performance, or, you know, I remember when I was 13 getting online and starting to visit GameSpot every day.
Right,
and really becoming aware. Yeah. I'm really becoming aware of who this Danny O'Dwyer guy was, and stuff like that. But like, I wonder if he's gonna have that same thing where he goes online and he like seeks out that information, or if he's just gonna have the thing that's in front of him and be like, actually, this is fine. This is totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it builds character for a kid to have an older console and stuff like that, and the process that the parent goes through of, you know, that's $200 to $250 in the bank right now, and the kid is going to be happy enough for at least a couple of years. That's an easy calculation to make in a lot of cases. Yeah,
totally fair.
All right, last thing on this, the accessory spending dipped 5% compared to a year ago, to $185 million. This is the lowest January accessory spending since January 2020. So January, right as the pandemic was like just very like getting started, like the very, very beginning tip of that, where there was a lot of uncertainty. I think this is one of those numbers you look at and be like, oh yes, things are sort of returning back to pre-pandemic levels, not just like
just in time, everything's going back to normal.
Right? Yes, like and kind of
let's like just call an audible on the last 5 years, guys. Okay.
And it's dipping below those numbers, and it's like, oh, okay. So I think people have like really actually turned away. There was always that like, oh, maybe they'll be able to keep some gains of the pandemic, and for a minute there they did. But as these new generations have dragged on, and the Switch 2 has sort of presented itself, people are going, I can wait. Because it's just all too expensive, and I don't blame anyone for thinking that. Last story here: Resident Evil Requiem leakers deserve, quote, 1,000 deaths, says Hideki Kamiya. This is from Ollie Reynolds.
Weirdly enough, this is actually the usual punishment that you get for breaking a Konami embargo. So it's strange that someone would call for it for a Capcom one, but you know,
it's right there. It's right there in the legalese. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, these companies talk, and maybe Capcom's reading up on what Konami's been doing.
Yep, I'll read his message here. I'm sure the final developments of Resident Evil 2 were also exposed in the weekly photo magazine for your own selfish satisfaction. You trampled on the feelings of the users who were looking forward to the game, as well as the feelings of the creators who put all their effort into making it. It's a despicable act that destroys the happiness of everyone and deserves 1,000 deaths. May you be cursed to never be able to play games again. Man, that's some bad juju to put on somebody for sure. But yeah, look, people have been spoiling this, and they've been doing it in some like really bold ways where they've just been going to social media and throwing late game stuff out there in video clips that are very easy to accidentally start watching. So I hope that people were able to avoid that. That game is out soon, and I'm looking forward to hearing what people think.
Interesting embargo on that one. Yeah. I'm curious how people go about dealing with that embargo.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, that's going to wrap up the headlines and the stories for today. Let's get to the other stuff we got to do. There's no poll question because it was Friday and we did the Bomb 12. But hey, if you want to submit your game for the Bomb 12 this week, the game that you've been playing, just go to giantbomb.com, scroll down, go ahead and observe what was the Bomb 12 from last week. But there on the left-hand side, you'll find a button that is a link to a form where you could drop whatever game you're playing up and until through Friday. We'll get the results, talk about it on Friday's show, and wrap up the week that way. In the meantime, though, Lexi, why don't you tell people where they can find you on the internet, what you have going on, and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, I'm not going to be around too much this week. I'm traveling to an event in London for 2 days, but I have to go up to Dublin first, so I'm actually going to be traveling for like 4 days, which is... yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky, at lexluddy.xyz. We have a bunch of really cool stuff coming up on Start Menu, which is the website that I run for people trying to break into games media and the games industry. We have some very cool reviews coming up. I'm sure you might be able to guess what those are. And you can catch me around the place talking about things.
All right, good deal. We have a new poll question. If you haven't purchased a Switch 2 yet, what will get you to do so? Price drop, more first-party games, OLED version, or nothing. We will get the results of that and talk about it on Game S Mornings here on Giant Bomb on Wednesday. Speaking of Giant Bomb, we're kind of sussing things out on this Monday. We're going to be going into our meeting right now and figuring everything out, but probably not doing Miss today. There's some things in motion, but we might have something else in its place. And then you could expect the Bombcast tomorrow. Expect coverage of a bunch of new games. Just look out for that all throughout the week. And we look forward to hanging out with you. You guys should go to giantbomb.com right now and just bookmark it. People still do that, right? All right. Let's see here. I think we got everything all wrapped up. Lexi, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and talking about video games. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, Grubb. Always a pleasure.
Thank you all for watching and listening. You are the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself. And goodbye.